Dust motes dancing in the fading light. Another town, another lone.
The church was filled with soft organ music, dazzling white roses, and a congregation dressed in vibrant lace and colorful head ties. A golden chandelier sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow on the altar where Prisca stood in a flawless white wedding gown beside James, her groom. Her makeup was perfect, her veil delicately draped, but her eyes, those wide, searching eyes, told a different story. Her hands trembled as the priest's voice cut through the silence. "Do you, Prisca, take James as your lawfully wedded husband?" A heavy stillness filled the room. Prisca's throat tightened. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching, waiting, James included. His smile faltered slightly as he sensed her hesitation. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her gaze swept over the packed church, the flowers, the friends, her parents' proud faces, and then the woman seated on the far end. Her. Prisca's breath caught in her throat. The bouquet fell from her hands with a soft thud that echoed louder than the music. The priest blinked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Without warning, Prisca turned and bolted down the aisle. Her veil flew behind her like a ghost fleeing a haunted house. Gasps filled the air as silence shattered into chaos. "Prisca!" James shouted, his voice laced with confusion and fear, as he chased her down the marble steps of the church. She tore through the church gates, past the stunned crowd, and onto the bustling Lagos Road. Her gown caught on a fence post, ripping slightly. Cars honked, people shouted, but all Prisca heard was her own voice screaming in her head. "I can't live a lie. I can't be who they want me to be." Tears mixed with mascara streamed down her cheeks. "I can't do this. I can't," she cried aloud, her heels clacking furiously against the asphalt. James finally caught up, panting. "Prisca, please, let's just talk. We can fix this." But she didn't stop. Up ahead loomed a high bridge. The river beneath churned like her thoughts, wild, dark, unforgiving. She climbed the rail, wind whipping her veil like a torn flag. "Prisca, no!" James yelled. "Please don't. One more step and I swear I'll jump. I won't live like this anymore, James." Before he could move closer, she let go. A scream, a splash, then silence. Prisca's body floated lifelessly down the murky river, her arms spread wide, veil tangled in the reeds. Her eyes were closed, her lips blue. The white of her wedding gown was dulled by the muddy current as she slowly sank beneath the surface. On the riverbank, David, a young farmer in his late 20s, was inspecting his irrigation channels, a routine chore before sundown. The low hum of insects and rustle of leaves filled the air, until something white drifting in the water caught his eye. "What in the world?" he muttered, narrowing his eyes. He dropped his hoe and rushed to the river's edge. When he realized it was a woman, dressed in a soaked wedding gown, floating face up, his heart jumped. Without a second thought, he dove in. The current pushed hard against him, but he fought through it, gripping her under her arms and dragging her toward the riverbank. Once on dry land, he laid her gently behind a large boulder for shelter. She wasn't breathing. "No, no, no, stay with me," he said urgently. He began CPR, pumping her chest rhythmically and giving her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Seconds felt like hours. Just when despair began to rise in his chest, Prisca suddenly coughed violently, gasping for air as water gushed from her mouth. She lay there shivering, eyes barely open, but alive. Just then, from atop the nearby ridge, James appeared, mud-splattered, breathless, yelling her name. His eyes scanned the area desperately. From behind the boulder, David crouched low, shielding Prisca. Her breathing was shallow but steady. James spotted David standing near the river and called out, "Hey, you there! Have you seen a woman in a wedding dress? She's my wife." David looked up, calm but alert. He hesitated only for a second. "No," he said simply, "haven't seen anyone like that." James swore under his breath and sprinted off in another direction, calling Prisca's name into the fading light. David watched him disappear, then turned to the weak woman in his arms. With gentle care, he lifted her bridal style and began walking toward his small cottage hidden beyond the trees. At David's modest countryside home, the wooden door creaked open just as he approached with the unconscious woman in his arms. Harriet, his wife, stood in the doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her eyes immediately narrowed, and her voice cut through the air like a blade. "Who is she, David? And where exactly are you carrying her?" David, soaked and out of breath, didn't meet her eyes at first. "Please, Harriet, she fell into the river. I think her husband tried to hurt her. She needs help." Harriet scoffed. "That's his business. Why bring her here? Before police start sniffing around and dragging us into this." "She was barely breathing," David said firmly. "She would have died. I couldn't just leave her there." Their eyes locked in tense silence. Then Harriet sighed, lips tight. "One night. No more." With that, she turned away, muttering under her breath. David carried Prisca into the guest room, gently laying her on the bamboo-framed bed. Harriet brought a clean, oversized gown and helped him change the unconscious woman out of the soaked wedding dress. They covered her with a thick wrapper, and David sat at her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall. Night fell. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft flicker of an oil lamp. A sudden gasp shattered the stillness. Prisca bolted upright, panting, eyes wild with fear. "It's okay," David said quickly, moving closer. "You're safe now." She looked around, confused, before whispering, "Where am I?" "You're at my home. I pulled you out of the river." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "James, he's not really my husband. He's been drugging me for years, blackmailing me. He threatened to kill my family if I didn't marry him." David's face hardened with fury. "That man should be in prison." In the doorway, Harriet stood quietly, arms still crossed, but her expression softer now. She had overheard every word. After a pause, she stepped forward. "You can stay, just for a while," she said stiffly. Prisca broke down in tears. David placed a hand on her shoulder, while Harriet turned away, but her clenched jaw had begun to relax. The next morning, Harriet left the house early, claiming she needed to check the fields. She didn't even make eye contact with David or Prisca. Her steps were brisk, her face unreadable. But what David didn't know was that she wasn't going alone. In the dense cornfield behind the barn, Harriet met Obina, a muscular younger man who had worked as David's farm assistant for over a year. They exchanged a knowing glance, and within seconds, they were locked in a passionate embrace behind the tool shed, hidden from sight. Later that morning, Prisca walked quietly into the small kitchen, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. "Good morning," she said softly, offering it to David. "I brought you something warm." David smiled, surprised by her gesture. "Thank you, Prisca. That's kind of you." He paused, looking around. "By the way, have you seen Harriet?" "She wasn't beside me when I woke up." Prisca hesitated. "Maybe she's walking around," she replied, though her eyes flickered with something concern, maybe doubt. The next day, as David prepared to head to the farm, Prisca asked if she could come along. "I want to stretch my legs and maybe learn something," she said with a nervous chuckle. David agreed. As he gathered tools inside the shed, Prisca waited outside, and that's when she saw it. Obina, glancing around nervously, crept across the yard and jumped through Harriet's window. Prisca's mouth fell open. She ran back to the shed, her heart pounding. "I don't want to intrude," she whispered urgently, "but something strange is happening. Your worker just climbed into your wife's room." David's eyes darkened as rage and disbelief surged through him. Instinctively, he reached for the machete leaning against the wall, but after a shaky breath, he let it fall from his grip. With quiet, trembling steps, he followed Prisca to the side of the house. They crouched beside the window and peeked in. What he saw crushed him. Harriet and Obina were tangled together on the bed, naked, their bodies locked in betrayal. David's chest tightened, his legs weakened. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then, with a sudden burst of fury, he kicked the door open. "How could you?" he croaked, his voice breaking, then louder, sharper. "Get out, both of you!" Obina scrambled to grab his clothes and fled through the back door. Harriet dropped to her knees, sobbing and begging for mercy, but David had none. "Out!" he shouted, pointing. "Now," she obeyed. Later that evening, David stood alone on the porch, his shoulders slumped, eyes lost in the horizon. The sun dipped low, casting an orange glow over the fields, but his heart felt cold, hollow. Everything he had built, his home, his marriage, had crumbled in a single moment. Prisca quietly joined him, standing beside him for a moment before gently wrapping her arms around his waist. She didn't say anything at first, just held him. "You saved my life, David," she whispered softly, resting her head against his shoulder. "Now, let me help you heal yours." David closed his eyes, the tension in his body melting just a little. The next morning, they walked to the farm together. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in days, David smiled, genuinely. It was small, but real. But as they reached the edge of the field, laughter still lingering between them. A dark figure stepped out from behind a tree, James. His eyes were wild, bloodshot with rage and desperation. Before either of them could react, he lunged forward and grabbed Prisca roughly by the arm. "You thought you could run from me?" he snarled, his grip tightening. Prisca gasped, struggling to free herself. "Let me go!" Before she could scream, David stepped forward and shoved James hard in the chest, forcing him to stumble backward. "She said no, leave her alone," David barked, standing protectively in front of her. James glared at him, chest heaving, fists clenched. "You'll regret this, both of you," he hissed, trembling with fury. But something in David's unwavering stare made him pause. He backed off, slowly, silently, then disappeared into the trees. Months passed, and the wounds of betrayal and pain slowly began to heal. Prisca and David worked side by side on the farm, their days filled with laughter, shared effort, and quiet moments of understanding. What started as companionship blossomed into something deeper, something rooted in trust, gratitude, and a love that grew stronger with each sunrise. With James finally out of their lives and Harriet long gone, peace settled over the small cottage like a gentle blanket. Prisca found joy in planting seeds, watching them bloom under her hands, and David rediscovered purpose in her presence. Together, they rebuilt not just a home, but a sanctuary. One golden evening, as the sky turned to honey and the fields swayed gently in the breeze, David knelt on one knee in the very spot where Prisca once stood, shyly asking to help. "I never planned to love again," he said softly, his eyes full of emotion, "but you came like a miracle." Prisca smiled, her heart full. "And I never thought I'd be free, but you gave me that, and more." Tears glistened in her eyes as she leaned down. They kissed, the setting sun bathing them in gold.
Thank you for watching. Which part of the story touched your heart the most? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories.
Like